Hello Wolfpack, ladies and gentlemen, we've seen 9.1% inflation come out from the United States of America. Absolutely devastating numbers, with no exaggeration there. And I think the reason why this situation is so bad and the reason why this situation looks so terrible is because, well, you know, there's no escape, isn't there? I mean, crypto's down, stock market's down, gold's down, everything is down, and there's no way to get out of it, right? So I think everyone's kind of hurting a bit looking at those numbers. And the only thing we can really do is try and catch the bottom on these, cryptocurrency coins like Bitcoin. And for people who are interested in the stock market, try and catch the bottom in the stock market. And there's very simple ways to do that I'm going to be going over in this video. And I'm also going to be saying straight off the bat, it's very, very unlikely that the bottom is in for Bitcoin, especially given this new data that has come out. Now, the estimated year-on-year inflation yesterday, the expected number to come out was 8.8%. We have seen 9.1%, which means we are 0.3% over what is expected, which means the market did not fully price in that hike there, that interest rate hike month on month, or that interest rate data release, I should say. And we're seeing actually really interestingly, and I think this is very actually quite amusing, a bit of an irrational pump straight off the bat. We saw the CPI numbers release around here. We had a dump, and now we're moving upwards. This is not illogical. It is illogical, but it's not unexpected. We should be expecting irrational price action around these major dates. We've seen it on multiple occasions. Apologies for the sun in this video, by the way. But we've seen it on multiple occasions. In fact, basically every time we see CPI numbers released, we see some sort of stupid, unjustified pump, right? In the last 6-7 months, we've been seeing even more than that, actually 8-9 months. We've been seeing CPI numbers increase, inflation increase month on month. And all we need to do is go to the inflation chart to see that, right? Ever since around, May 2020, so actually a lot longer. But mainly ever since around, early 2021, we've seen those inflation numbers increase month on month. So way longer than 9 months, like I said, they're probably around 18 months. We've seen those, inflation numbers increase, and every time we see it. Every time we see them released into the market, the day or the days, even sometimes 48, 72 hours preceding those numbers releasing, we see some sort of irrational pump, right? So don't be fooled by this pump we're seeing. The news that came out yesterday is anything but bullish, right? It is bearish news. And how do we know that? How do we know it's bearish news? We're going to jump into it right now. This is the historical inflation chart from the United States of America. For those of you who don't know, inflation directly affects both Bitcoin and the S&P 500. Now, the higher inflation is, basically the lower the S&P 500 goes. I'm going to look at that in a second. And the essential fact that I'm trying to get into here is that the S&P 500 will not bottom out without inflation topping out. I'll repeat that one more time. The S&P 500 will very likely not bottom out until inflation tops out. And as you guys know, Bitcoin and the S&P 500 are connected to the macro situation. So if the S&P 500 doesn't bottom out until inflation tops out, the chances are Bitcoin will not bottom out until inflation tops out. I'm going to show you a couple of pieces of data here that you might have seen around. I've been talking about this for months. Essentially what we have here, this first line on the inflation chart is from October 1974. If we're going to be S&P 500, we can see in October 1974, we saw the bottom after a 50% correction, which means that the S&P 500 bottomed out when inflation topped out. We saw the same thing in October 1990, right? Inflation topped out when the S&P 500 bottomed out. And then in June 2009, in the same few month period, we saw inflation top out, which led to the S&P 500 bottoming out. So essentially, we haven't had one of these inflation surges in the entire price history of Bitcoin. But what we can observe through basically, correlation, the correlation coefficient of Bitcoin and the S&P 500, which is about 0.7, we can see that generally speaking, Bitcoin goes where the S&P 500 goes. That doesn't mean that Bitcoin's connected to the S&P 500. It means Bitcoin and the S&P 500 are both separately connected to the macro, and the macro situation does not allow risk-on assets to bottom out before inflation tops out, right? So in order to see a bottom on the S&P 500, we need to be seeing inflation topping out, which would be a CPI number release coming in lower than the last CPI number release, right? So the next CPI number release is happening, I think, on the 10th or 13th of August, okay? If that comes in lower than 9.1%, which is what we just saw, we will be seeing a chance for the S&P 500 and a chance for Bitcoin to bottom out, right? But there is pretty much, let's just say, a very small chance of it coming in lower. How do I know that, right? How am I guessing this? And how did I predict that the CPI would come in higher this month? Well, I use interest rates, right? Interest rates are a pretty easy way to determine what the Federal Reserve is doing, how harshly they're reacting to the situation, how bad the situation is. And what we've seen in the Federal Reserve, we've seen one 25 basis point hike, we've seen one 50 basis point hike, and then we've seen one 75 basis point hike, and we'll be seeing another rate hike later on this month. So what we've seen is not only rates increasing, which means their effort to fight inflation is increasing, but rates increasing in magnitude at each rate hike they do. So 25, 50, 75. So not only are they increasing, they're lifting them, lifting them faster and faster each time they get to, which means that inflation is probably nowhere near being under control, and actually points to evidence, and points to our theory, which I've been talking about for literally, 8 months since November, of the 4-year cycle theory. I do not think that Bitcoin is going to bottom out until Q4. I've talked about this, as I said, since November last year, since 63K. I don't think this bear market will end until Q4. What price do I think it will end at? I don't know, but I can say the bottom is most likely not in on Bitcoin, right? Because Q4 will be the bottom as per the 4-year cycle theory, and as is being proven by the macro situation right now, right? Inflation still has to go higher. Interest rates still need to be hiked until we see a reversal on that, which I think we'll be seeing in Q4 at some point. You can basically kiss the market goodbye and kiss your dreams of the bottom being in goodbye. I'm sorry to say, but it's simply the case. Now, with that said, and we'll jump back to the 4-year cycle in a second, with that said, this macro uptrending yellow line needs to be taken seriously, right? Okay, so I think the bottom isn't in. I don't think the bottom's in, but I also think in terms of TA, we have a macro uptrending line. It needs to be taken seriously. Don't get overly bearish until we lose it. When you lose it, that's when you get overly bearish. Right now, we're technically on macro support. And if we're looking at what's happening, we zoom up actually, we can see that we're actually compressing on macro support, because what we're actually seeing right now is the price compress between the 200-week SMA, which is going to edge towards this macro uptrending line, and it's going to leave the price compressed and with nowhere to go. Eventually, it's going to have to move upwards, or it's going to have to move downwards. And I think that downwards move is probably more likely, even if it's just a wick, right? Even if we hold this line for a long time, then in Q4 we see a wick downwards, and then we jump back up and we continue into normal cyclical theory, right? That could happen. I've said multiple times, I don't know what price Bitcoin's going to bottom out. If I had to guess, I'd say 12 to 14K, but I'm not sure. But I do know that Q4 is most likely going to be the bottom. And the further we get towards Q4, the more the macro situation looks worse, and the more the macro situation looks like it's not going to recover until Q4, the more our theory is confirmed, the more our prediction is confirmed. I think it's very, 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 very unlikely that the Bitcoin bottom is in, right? That's my simple opinion there. I think in order for the Bitcoin bottom to be in here, we need to be seeing something we haven't seen before. We need to be seeing Bitcoin depeg, right? Possible. I'm not saying it's impossible, because it is, but unpredictable. And so as an analyst, I can't predict something that I have no evidence for. And what I have evidence for is the fact that Bitcoin will not bottom out until Q4, and it will not bottom out until the macro situation looks a bit better. At the moment, the macro situation is progressively worsening. So there's no reason to believe right now that Bitcoin has bottomed out. I think that anyone who says the Bitcoin bottom is in might, I think it depends how you're saying it, right? It depends how you say. Let me get that off the chest. It depends how you're saying it. If you're saying it according to the TA, this wouldn't be a stupid place to bottom. It's like, well, that's an objectively true statement. However, analysis isn't just TA, it's macro as well. And according to the macro, and according to the biggest macro trend of them all, the 4-year cycle theory, the bottom will not be in until Q4. And so, yes, I think it's slightly illogical to think the bottom is in at this point. And I think that's basically all I have to say in this video. I think that the CPI numbers that came out yesterday, 9.1% inflation, have confirmed and have further confirmed, added more weight behind our argument that the bottom will not be in until Q4. And I'm excited to see that bottom in Q4, because if we do bottom in Q4 and the 4-year cycle theory gets that extra piece of evidence behind it, we can predict even further trends on Bitcoin, and we can go ahead and predict what's going to happen in the next bull market, which I've already started to predict here. But, it's a little bit speculative without evidence of where the bottom is. I think the bottom will be Q4. I think this evidence that we've seen in the CPI supports that. And Q4, it's only 2.5 months away. October's only 2.5 months away. So people who say, oh, but Q4's so far away, so much can happen. It's like, well, 2.5 months isn't actually a long period of time. I think a little bit of patience would be great in this market here. And one more thing as well. It's like, well, even if the bottom was in at 17.5k, right? Even if that was the case, you know, which is very unlikely, which I've discussed in this video, we would probably come back down and retest it at some point. You don't usually see one wick to the low and then just go up. You usually see a wick to the low, and eventually you come back down, you retest it, and then you start to round out, right? Like etc. For example, what you saw in May to July 2021, we saw a massive capitulation. We saw a wick to the low. It took a while to get back down there. It took about almost a month and a half, but we eventually did, and we retested the low. We retested it again, and then we started to round out. That's what you'd actually see, even if this was the bottom. So, you know, I don't think you're in a rush to buy Bitcoin unless you're DCAing, in which case you need to really know what you're doing, because I'm not entirely in agreement with DCAing. I've spoke about that in the past. But yeah, I think that you're not in a rush to buy Bitcoin, even if the bottom is in, which I think is heavily unlikely. You'll see those prices again. And I think that's all we really can say about Bitcoin. Where do I think the highest possible bottom for Bitcoin is? The highest possible bottom on Bitcoin would be, in my opinion, the 300-week SMA, which is currently at 17k. And I can see us getting there in Q4 and hovering around that level, but more likely we're looking at 14k to 12k, or more specifically 11.5k to 13.5k. So yeah, I've said it before, I'll say it again, I'll just summarize one more time. CPI's come in, it's a lot higher than expected. It was expected at 8.8%, we saw 9.1%. The S&P won't bottom out until inflation tops out, same with Bitcoin, and so there's no reason to believe the bottom is in at this point, according to the macro situation. Thanks for watching. I'm going to look at a few things before I end the video. The first of which being Wolves Crypto VIP. Go to my YouTube channel homepage, click on the join button, and you can gain access to Wolves Crypto VIP for the low price of 40 AUD per month, which is 28 USD per month, which is less than $1 a day. You get Altcoin Trading Signals, you get Prioritized reply to comments, you'll get a 2-hour video on market psychology, and you'll get occasional access to my TradingView charts where I see it necessary. So go ahead and join up there. We've got the Crypto Academy, which is a 10-unit course teaching you guys how to become a trader, hence the name Become a Trader. And so it goes through from step 1 to step 10, and basically from concept 1 to concept infinite, because it teaches you everything you need to know in order to become a competent trader. Everything myself and Mega Crypto, who are both full-time traders, use on a daily basis. From market patterns, indicators, candlestick patterns, psychology, how to find trades themselves. Basically everything you need to know there. So that's pretty interesting stuff. And if you want to gain access to that and you want to enroll or join the course or become a student, whatever you want to say, go ahead and chuck us an email here at cryptoacademycourses@gmail.com, and we'll send you some information about the course and a video explaining what it is and what it looks like. And then lastly but not least, we've got the BitGet exchange, which is my personal favorite exchange that I use on a sub-daily basis, because I trade sub-daily, not daily. It honestly depends what's happening in the market, but generally speaking, I trade sub-daily. And we've got BitGet exchange here, half the fees of Binance, non-KYC, rewards referral program, which accesses you to a reward center worth over 4,000 USD in rewards for completing some tasks there. It's really a no-brainer. Sign up to BitGet, takes 5 minutes, and you're supporting the channel as well using my referral link in the pinned comment below and the description. We use this for the VIP channel. All of my VIP members should have BitGet already, and if you're not a VIP member, guess what? You can still use it. So thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video, guys, and I'll catch you in the next one. Cheers.